Yes, people, what's happening? Welcome back to Chelsea Fan TV and welcome to another episode of the Chelsea Fan TV podcast. First things first, guys, make sure you smash a like on the video, subscribe to Chelsea Fan TV if you haven't done so already, and make sure you leave your thoughts in the comments below on today's episode. And it's been less than a week since the season finished. It feels like ages, but it's not really been that long, but so much has happened already. Chelsea fans obviously delighted to see the back of a disastrous campaign, but there's lots to be excited about. You know, the transfer market's heating up. Pochettino's been officially unveiled as manager, and there's optimism around the place again. You know, loads of players already being linked with moves away. We need to trim the squad down. Exciting incomings potentially moving closer. So going from kind of an absolute disappointment of last season less than a week ago, kind of feeling a little bit excited again. We're delighted to be joined by Nina. Thank you for coming as always. How have you found the break from Chelsea? I know it's not even been a week yet, but you enjoying it? Feel refreshed that we don't have to kind of watch this every week for a couple of months?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's nice to get a rest from the football, but I feel like we're not really resting because, like you said, it's been a week, but we're straight in there. They're keeping us on our toes with all the news that's coming in left, right and centre, wasting no time in selling players as well. So it's nice to have a rest from what we've seen on the pitch, which has been disastrous. Like, we've hoped for games to improve and be better, but they just haven't. And the fact that that kind of feeling is over, of just waiting to push through another game, is quite nice. So yeah, I'm happy to get a little bit of a break. It's nice to see some interesting news get thrown around. I mean, obviously there's been shocking breaking news as well earlier this week, but yeah, I just feel like we've got every day this summer is going to be crucial to how we approach next season. And you know, the rebuild starts now, like we were chatting the other day, really.
Yeah, there's lots of work to be done. There's no time to rest and take stock. You've got to crack on and get the ball rolling for next season to make sure that we don't repeat the same mistakes that we've just done. But I mean, just to take it back to last season very briefly, like, it's kind of mad. So much happened. We had Tuchel, then we had Potter, then we had Lampard. I don't think anyone expected us to have the worst season we've ever had, certainly in Chelsea's Premier League history. When you sort of look back on it, I mean, can you believe how bad it was? Because, like, it literally, bar getting relegated, it pretty much couldn't have been any worse. I mean, I wasn't expecting us to be amazing last season because, you know, I think the signs were there that, you know, we were on the decline under Thomas Tuchel. The performances in the league haven't been good for a number of years, but we kind of still managed to pull ourselves together in the cups, make a few finals, win a couple of trophies here and there. But I mean, I knew the top four would be a struggle to make this season, but I thought we'd be at least kind of top 5, top 6. But to be bottom half of the table and just be nowhere near on any front, I mean, surely, I mean, obviously you weren't expecting it, but I mean, are you surprised? I mean, why do you feel that it went so badly for us?
No, yeah, definitely. I am surprised. Like you said, I think we all accepted it would be difficult with the takeover and that we'd have to go through some difficulties and changes. But I don't think anyone expected it to be this bad. I mean, you're talking results-wise, you're talking injuries, decisions, rotation of players, selections of lineups. There's just so many things this season. And of course, you remember when we literally had an 11-man squad of injured players, but most of them were regular starters as well. Obviously, the World Cup, I know everyone went off to the World Cup, but we had a lot of injured players at the time then as well. Not many of them returned after, and you did feel the absence of a lot of those crucial players. You know, I'm talking Reece James, I'm talking Chile as well. There's a lot of them, obviously Thiago Silva and Kante, and I think nothing was actually easy. You know, I feel like, I don't know who wrote our story for this season, but I feel like you literally can't make it up. You know, it's the fact that it's bizarre to even think that, for example, Kante didn't even play under Potter. Like, that's just how, like, injured he was, you know. Yet we went through all of those shocking moments of football with Potter, and it's just like, if, like, we knew, obviously, well, we knew we'd get a new manager, obviously, when he sacked Tuchel, but I think, I mean, myself, I knew, obviously, he'd done quite a few things with Brighton, he'd done bits with Brighton, but for me, it was always hard to kind of swallow and let go of Tuchel. I think I personally did that a lot slower than most people. And then obviously you're comparing everything to him, and you're kind of, because essentially the ownership has just taken over. They're trying to gain your trust. They're making decisions that obviously affecting the club long term. But when something like that fails so miserably with Potter, then you turn your head to the ownership and you question kind of their intentions and their decisions. And I think we just went through a lot of uncertainty again this season season, when this season was meant to be kind of taking that step towards, you know, something new, something certain, something solid, something worthwhile for the next 5-10 years at Chelsea. But it almost seemed like we took 5 steps back. And like you said, bar relegation, I mean, every possibly horrendous thing that could have happened to us. And I always kind of said, I cut Potter some slack at the start as well, because I said, look, right, of course he's had a little bit of experience, but he's been thrown into a huge job at Chelsea. You know, we're talking integrating players that Tuchel wanted, you know, kind of getting to know the ownership, getting to know the squad as well. And we had a lot of players, and I truly think that Potter was massively out of his depth. Obviously, I was Potter until the very end, but it just got to a point where you don't really know what you're backing, because the results weren't really improving at all. I think we had 3 back-to-back kind of wins at one point, kind of, you know, around the Dortmund game as well. And you're kind of like, oh, well, maybe. And then it's just stripped away. And obviously nobody expected really for Lampard as well to be finishing off the season. I feel like if someone told you that Frank Lampard would literally be our caretaker manager for the end few months there this year, would you have believed them? Because
no, something would have gone massively wrong. And it basically did go wrong. But like, I see a lot of people criticizing the ownership, and like, I don't want to. I've been accused in the comment sections and whatnot of being like sort of PR for the owners, which is not the case. But I will stand up for them in certain instances. Like, they've made mistakes, no doubt about it. And you know, you look back on it now, and they've come in little bit of a wrecking ball mentality, trying to put their stamp on things. They tried to make too many changes too quickly, removing too many people too quickly. I think one of the biggest mistakes that Bowley made was obviously removing Tuchel, but not having a footballing department, a footballing structure in place to carry out a proper managerial search. Like, once he departed, like, it felt very sudden. It was literally like, bang, Tuchel gone. Less than 2 days later, Potter's in. Like, Bowley's made mistakes. Like, they'll openly admit they've made mistakes. They're trying to make too many changes too quickly, clearing out medical departments, clearing out football departments, making perhaps unpopular decisions, and not perhaps really understanding that the size of the task at hand. I think it's way too early to write them off as bad owners. Like, for me, the intentions are there, the backing's there, the investment's there. They've put the footballing department in place. Bowley's going to take a little bit of a back seat now from that, because, you know, he doesn't need to. He can overlook the business side of things, let the footballing people take care of the football side of things. And I think there are reasons to be positive. But again, the owners have now got because of what's happened, you know, with the decisions they've made, getting rid of Tuchel, Potter coming in, not working out, signing a lot of players. Jury's going to be out on a few of those still. You know, this decision to bring Pochettino in, this has to be right. The summer market, you know, this summer has got to be spot on, because they're not in a position this early on in their tenure to be making more mistakes. Already they seem to be losing trust of certain proportion of the fans, and the only way you can get the fans back on side is by winning. So this is why this Pochettino appointment is so important. And it's also why the owners have got to take a step back and give the manager what he wants, get rid of the players that need to be got rid of, and allow the footballing people to do their thing. But yeah, whilst there's been mistakes, but I think people also forget that, you know, takeovers take a long time to do. This was rushed through due to circumstances outside the club's control, with the Ukraine stuff. And, you know, we were on the back foot massively in the transfer market. Poor recruitment, poor planning under the previous regime for the last few years left us in a tricky situation as to why we had to go and sign so many players in January, because we've consistently underinvested in the squad, not invested in key areas year on year when we needed to. We left ourselves in a massive mess. It's just unfortunate. This was waiting to happen. You know, this was a ticking time bomb, a season like this, a situation like this. It's just unfortunate that it's occurred in the first year of a new ownership. But I'm confident the owners can get things right, can sort themselves out. Maybe I'm a bit more, you know, easy going on them than some people are, but I will openly admit when they've made mistakes and criticize them for it. But ultimately, there's no point, you know, getting angry at the owners and demanding them to leave. They're here for 10 years, at least minimum. As part of the deal, they've got to be here for 10 years. There's no point in getting angry at them and wanting them out, because they're not going anywhere. So they've got to earn our trust back. We've also got to try and trust them as well. But in terms of, obviously, the transfer market now, it's a busy time of the year. For me, it seems like a lot of teams are doing their business a lot earlier than you would normally see in transfer windows of the past. It's like it's only just gone into June, first couple of days, and already back end of May and whatnot, there's been so much transfer news, a lot of players moving towards the exit door. I mean, firstly, in terms of this summer, I mean, there's a lot of things that need to be done. There's a lot of important things. What's more important for you, the outgoings or the incomings? Because for me, both are equally important. It's so important we address the key areas, but it's equally important that we get rid of like 10 to 12 players that aren't good enough and a surplus to requirements as well.
No, that's literally, yeah, I've always said since the last couple kind of months that it's most important to for the outgoing players. You know, it's important to clear players out first, because then we're doing what we did in the last 2 transfer windows. It's accepting that some players need to leave, but it's adding players to kind of their positions anyway. You know, having them there, taking up spaces on the bench as well, kind of inhibiting playing time for players that have deserved to play a lot more this season. And you know, I've banged on about them all summer, all year. Like they know who they are, but it's a mission, I think, this summer to let those who don't want to be here go, because that's been our biggest problem. It's been one of our biggest problems this season as well. It's kind of trying to drain players out on the pitch, get them to play football, get them to score goals. Why are you trying to convince players that they should be able to play for the badge and for this? I don't think that's right. You know, it's one thing to not have a manager, to not be led, but it's another thing to actually not want to play. You know, you kind of can't, a good manager can't really force a player that doesn't want to be there to be there. So absolutely, a squad clear out is number one on the to-do list. If we do that first, then we're on a better road. It seems obviously that's how they are approaching it, players walking out first before we address the areas that we need to. And I mean, it's making sense now, isn't it? We're pretty much looking at a whole midfield revamped. We're looking at, like me and you were talking the other day, weren't we, the fact that some of these midfielders needed to leave, you know, seasons ago, and we've kind of been sponging out, you know, football for consecutive more years and stuff. But you know, you're talking the likes of Kovacic, obviously linked to City, Mount, you know, linked to United, and I don't know what the situation is there and how close that is to happening, but there you have it. Obviously Loftus, I mean, he's only really ever been a squad player, but still, you know, that's another kind of rotation that you're not going to have there from now on. Kante, his future at Chelsea is, you know, quite uncertain. Is he signing a contract? Is he not? But some people are saying that even if he is able to, that maybe he's coming to his kind of best, you know, careers at Chelsea as well, and that maybe he's a little bit exhausted as a player there as well. So you're pretty much looking at a complete kind of clear out of the midfield, and obviously that's a great way to start. You know, we've got Enzo in January. That's a fantastic starting point. A fantastic starting point. Now we obviously need to address to help him to strengthen that midfield. So it's quite promising to see that kind of aspect. You know, I'm seeing a lot of things about people kind of wanting to keep a few of them, but you know, our midfield is aging. It has aged. Obviously it's experienced, but you know, there's a time where you kind of have to move on, and obviously that's going to be a key area to address, you know, midfield massively. But I truly think it makes more sense to clear out, then address, then buy, then you know exactly what you're looking for. Then we prevent that whole thing happening where we've got a bloated squad, we've got 3-4 players in one position, half of which, you know, are here for 7-8 years, half of which you don't really know are they coming or going, but then we're making squad rotations which just don't really make sense, you know. And I think that's another thing I kind of cut Potter slack for, because I mean, how many squads did he have to rotate as well? And I feel like, because being the nice guy he is, he was probably just trying to give minutes to everyone, wasn't he? And I feel like that's just kind of where it went wrong, really. You know, as a manager, you know, no disrespect, but it's not Sunday League. You're not trying to give everyone minutes. You know, you've got certain players that you play, you rotate them. When you have to rotate them, you do, but they make sense. They haven't been making sense this season. So, of course, yeah, I'm quite happy to see that is how they're approaching it. That is how they're approaching it. Players walking out first. We've got to let go. We've got to make some money, you know, obviously for FFP. Got to sell homegrown players as well, which is what we seem to be doing as well. So obviously how much money we can get for them is another thing that I'm going to be, you know, taking notes on, and how we kind of sell them as well, because we can't be stupid and at the end of the day kind of underestimate players as well, sell them for less money than they're worth, and kind of, you know, dig ourselves up in a hole again, because that'd be embarrassing as well. So yeah, definitely I think I'm going to be keeping a close eye on obviously how owners kind of address this summer transfer window, but I almost feel like they might fall into the trap of maybe trying too hard again, if you know what I mean, like maybe just trying to make some decisions to kind of please the fans, because I think that's what Todd's been trying to do a lot, you know, last season, is trying to please the fans. You know, when things go wrong, oh, here's a, you know, 120 million, you know, fantastic World Cup winner, you know, enjoy him on deadline day. I know that's going to make you happy. And, you know, like just a series of loads of things. Obviously with going into the dressing room, I feel like that was also kind of an act to show the fans that he does care and that he is involved, and that he's not just an owner who will sit back, not go to the games, and just, you know, to leave it to whatever it is. But yeah, I think how we're approaching it now is quite good. It's hopefully going to be, you know, something that makes us money. So yeah, if that means that we find ourselves in a better place and we can sign some good midfielders to solidify that squad, that midfield for next season, then yeah, we just have to say goodbye, you know.
I think in terms of like the clear out, obviously it's well overdue. And one thing that I'm really impressed with the owners about is the way that we're actually now operating efficiently in the transfer market. Yes, you can say maybe last summer there were some signings that maybe we shouldn't have made. Maybe we've overpaid on certain players, Cucurella, possibly Sterling and whatnot. But ultimately, like, we are efficient in the market. We get deals done. We're tough negotiators, but ultimately we don't leave the negotiating table until we've got what we wanted. And it's been a long time since Chelsea have been ruthless and efficient in the transfer market. So from that perspective, it's great to see. Yes, we're not going to get every single target we go for. Like, football doesn't work like that. But the intent in the market and the way that we operate and the way that, you know, Bowley and Egbali can close deals with the guys in the footballing department, your Lawrence Stewarts, your Win Stanleys and whatnot, seem to be going around getting deals and moving players on, because for so long we've found it so difficult to shift players on because of our poor recruitment, where you bring in average players on massive contracts, they don't work out, you can't get rid of them because no one's going to pay them the wages that we've got them on, and you just end up loaning these guys out for year after year after year at great expense to the club, and they just fuck off on a free transfer. And we've seen it time and time and time again. So we've got to stop doing that. And yes, all the signings that we've made so far, they're not going to all work out, because not every single signing works out. But at least you're not going to have an issue getting rid of those players, or far less of an issue, because they're on much lower wages. Again, another thing that's great that they've done is the incentivized contracts, a lower base salary, but incentivized to earn more, qualifying for Champions League, winning trophies, goals, whatever it is. That's a much better way of going about things, because it keeps players motivated as well. And one thing that, like, you know, money's a strange thing, but like a lot of stuff boils down to money. And if your money is impacted in a negative way because you're not performing well, you're going to make sure that you perform better to get your money back or to earn more money. And it's a good motivational tool to have. So I'm pleased about that sort of thing. But in terms of the outgoings, let's just touch on a few players, because it feels like a kind of a bit of an end of an era, or an end of a Chelsea kind of as we knew it. You know, obviously we were there last game of the season. Loftus, let's start with Loftus-Cheek briefly. Obviously he was saying his goodbyes to the fans. We could tell that when he was subbed off. He's been here all his career, come through the academy. I think he's done a great job for the club. You know, had a couple of seasons on loan at Palace, on loan at Fulham. But he's been someone that under Maurizio Sarri was class, and it's a massive what if for me. What if that Achilles injury didn't occur just before the Europa League final? How good would this guy have been for us? You know, he's got himself back fit again. He's done a good job in games here and there, but I never felt we've seen the best of Ruben because of that injury. And it does feel like a shame. And I do think there's still a place for him in the squad, in terms of, he never moans about his playing time. He's versatile. He puts a shift in. It's a little bit, I don't feel sad about it, but like it feels for me, it kind of feels like there could still be a space in the squad for him there. And I mean, I obviously wish him all the best. You know, he's given everything for Chelsea. He's never disrespected the club or made a fuss about anything. I mean, how do you feel about him moving on?
Yeah, I really rate Ruben Loftus-Cheek as a player. I think when we've needed him, he stepped up. You know, he's kind of known as a squad player, but you know, he's in my head, he's young, but he's not. He's like 9 years old now, isn't he?
28 now. Yeah, he's been around for ages.
He's literally been around for ages. And if you think, you know, obviously that injury, yeah, but if you think how kind of often he's played at Chelsea, or even how long he's been a starter, like it's just not really there. And you think, well, fair enough if he's maintained that attitude throughout, you know, these few years. Like you said, he's not a player to complain. He steps up when he needs to, whether it's for kind of a big injury in our midfield or whatever. But you know, I'd say that Loftus-Cheek he's played some pretty football. You know, he's been one of our more technically gifted players. You know, even on the last game against Newcastle, I thought he was carrying the ball pretty well. He was kind of driving it out into better spaces. And yeah, I feel like Loftus-Cheek, I don't think he would be greatly missed. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but I think, you know, fair enough, it's time for him to move on as well. And I think that's exactly what's just been keeping us back, is that, you know, we are not letting go of a lot of players, and they're just kind of, you know, lingering around. They're always there. You kind of always see them, you know, on the bench, but when do they play, when do they not? And I just think that it's just well and truly time to say goodbye to those players, because like when you saw with City, you know, when they've sat on that bench, they've got a whole bloody squad of starters, and then on the pitch they've also got, you know, pretty much half and half of starters or future starters as well. And you kind of think, well, yeah, but when you look at our bench in most of the games, you kind of see those players like Ruben Loftus, like Ziyech and Pulisic, and kind of it just doesn't really make sense. It doesn't really make sense, and that's just not what you need. So yeah, 100% time to say goodbye. That's why I'm not being overly sentimental this summer. You know, yeah, it's going to hurt to maybe say, I'd say it's probably for me going to be the hardest maybe to say goodbye to Kovacic as well. Obviously Mount, that's just a different situation now, isn't it? But, you know, Kovacic, like I said, he's aged. He's not quite there, not quite been there. Obviously some people will put that down to injuries, but, you know, I think Kova's been a solid player, and it is a little bit sad that, like you said, those kind of Chelsea, like proper Chelsea from that kind of era aren't going to be there anymore, and then we're working with something completely different. So I feel like we're about to go through a lot more change than people anticipate, and I think it's going to be a real reality check to let go of these players, and then just work from that, really, because I would dare say call it a clean slate, essentially, you know.
Yeah, I think we kind of are almost starting again. And another thing as well, in terms of the squad size, yeah, Pochettino doesn't like to use a lot of players. I'm not saying he only uses 11, but like there'll be about 20 players, but the squad will be probably 24, 25 players. But Poch doesn't use a lot of players anyway. Playing once a week, there's going to be far less room for rotation. It's going to be a close-knit group, which is going to be a lot better for us. You know, and there'll be an 11 that he fancies, like that are the chosen side. And then there'll be another 3 or 4 that he likes to use. The rest, I don't want to say they're surplus to requirements, but they're going to be on the periphery. There's like the way that he likes to work is with a small squad. So yes, it's going to be weird seeing a lot of these guys go, but this has been well overdue for years and years and years. We've banged on about this for so many years now that it seems to finally be coming, and it will be different. And the squad that we started this season with that's just finished is totally different to the squad we ended the season with. And then the squad we ended the season with is going to be totally different again to the squad that we started the season with. So, you know, you look at the situation we're in, and yes, we spent a lot of money, and yes, we brought a lot of players in, but we've had to do that. So I think after this summer, you will then see us adding 1 or 2 top additions in certain positions each window. And that's what you do when you're at the top. You just add 1 or 2 here and there each window, because that's what you have to do. You need to have 2 quality players in each position. And people go on about strength in depth. Yeah, but quality and depth is vital as well. You need 2 top players in each position. There's no point, amount of times that people have moaned, oh, so-and-so's injured, and then the next guy that comes in is such a drop-off. Yeah, it is. And then when you address that issue and you bring someone in that obviously might not be quite, say, Malagusto, for example, maybe not quite as good as Reece James, but it's not going to be the same as putting Aspilicueta there. It's not going to be the same as putting Trevor Chalobah there. These are the things that make a massive, massive difference. You know, you look back at, I hate going back to like the past and that because it's almost irrelevant to a point, but you know, you look at when we were winning leagues under Mourinho, Ancelotti, we had like the quality in the positions that we had, 2 top players in each position. When we were under Jose, when he first come, we had 4 wingers, Joe Cole, Wright Phillips, Robin, Duff, like 4 top draw players where if one of those guys didn't play, the other guy came in and he didn't really notice the difference. It's been too long since we've had that. It's been too long since we've had a world-class squad. Yes, there's been good players in and around it, but ultimately, for too long now, there's been far too many average players that are just here to pick up the money and are almost stealing a living. And we can't continue to operate in that way because we've done it for too long now. We've got to stop operating on sentimentality and start operating as a ruthless football club again, because otherwise we're just going to get left behind and we're going to find ourselves struggling to get ourselves back up the table and competing for the big trophies and competing at the higher end of the league. And it's as simple as that for me. But in terms of other players that are moving out, obviously, you know, as we said, we need to raise about 100 million quid before the end of June to comply with FFP. With the amount of players we've got to sell, that's not really going to be an issue, but until they're actually out the door and the money's in the bank account, then obviously there's still, I guess, that slight worry. But a couple of players that divide opinion massively. Let's start with Kai Havertz. It's fair to say that it's been an underwhelming 3 years, to put it lightly. You look back at Havertz at Leverkusen, and you know, one of the most exciting young players in Europe, had all the top clubs after him: Bayern Munich, Real Madrid. we stole a march with COVID to flex the financial muscle under Roman, and we signed Havertz. You know, if you put the first season aside for him being kind of new country, new league, COVID-affected season, him having COVID himself a couple of times and whatnot, it's still been 2 seasons then of massive underperformance and a complete lack of consistency. Not really sure where he's going to be playing and whatnot. There is strong interest from Real Madrid, but again, there's a long way to go from interest from Madrid to him actually being sold to Madrid and holding up that Real Madrid shirt in the presentation. So, like, whilst, you know, if a bid comes in for Havertz, then I think we should take it. It's clear that it's not worked out for him, but there's still a long way to go there. And, you know, Havertz could be a decent squad player potentially. I mean, there's part of me that thinks under Pochettino, him rotating in that number 10 role within Kunku, could that be quite good? If he's not a guaranteed starter and he's just playing here and there from the bench or starting the World Cup game, could that still be of use to Chelsea? Like, it's quite hard, but then we fall into this cycle again where I think, let's give him one more season. Let's see what he does. And then we have the same conversation 12 months later. So it probably is time for Chelsea to move on and cut their losses. But what I would say on Havertz is he absolutely isn't a shit footballer. There's ability there. No. There's ability there. There's talent there. But for whatever reason, whether it's the system, whether it's the league, whether it's the style of play, at Chelsea, it just simply hasn't worked for him for whatever reasons that is. But where do you stand on Havertz? And ultimately, like, Chelsea want an important, quote unquote, important bid to come in for him. We spent 70 million on him a few years ago. He's still young, early 20s, got his best years ahead of him, can develop into a top player still. For me, Chelsea are probably going to want at least 50 to 60 million quid for him, considering we paid 70 a couple years ago. So where do you stand on Kai? And ultimately, for me, it probably is the end of the road for him at Chelsea. It just doesn't look like it's working out.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. Neither do I think he's a bad footballer. I think he's got a lot of talent. He puts in hard work. He puts in good shift. But my worry is we keep Havertz again, and then Pochettino comes in and he tries this whole thing with working out where Havertz fits, you know, potentially just really draining that and potentially getting nothing out of it. And then we find ourselves kind of mid-season again. And, you know, we've not scored goals. Like, it's not been bright. It's not been good for us. But, you know, Kai Havertz keeps lingering around and, you know, he's picking up blame left, right and centre. And I just feel like that could be a very kind of negative setback for next season. However, like you said, I think he's worth some monies. You know, I think we should be able to get at least maybe 50, 60 million off him because, or like you said, we've obviously paid a high fee for him, and a lot of people will say that he's just not lived up to that, and that even the Champions League goal is not worth that much money. And, you know, bar that, he's not really brought much else to the table. So obviously Havertz has divided opinion a lot, but for me, it's just been like this season when he's continuously, repeatedly been started by Potter and obviously Lampard as well. It's just been like Groundhog Day, you know, it's just the same thing. You talk about Havertz, you know, when you talk negatively about players on the pitch, you know, Havertz comes up in those conversations a lot of the time. And for me, it's been frustrating this season is that, you know, we've been trying to play him as a number 9 desperately, because obviously, I mean, not much choice there. But, you know, then you think, well, actually, we do have choice, you know. I know, obviously, Aubameyang and Datro Fofana aren't the best kind of options, but, you know, there's still number 9s. Like, we could have potentially tried to get a lot more out of them. But, you know, Havertz has taken that spot there consistently week in, week out. And, you know, obviously, I don't know, all our managers have seemed to have a thing for starting Havertz. Does he ooze experience, or does he ooze just, I don't know, playing it safe? I'm not quite sure. But, you know, with Havertz, you'll get a couple good games and then managers seem to think, yeah, wow, you know, you're the best player on earth. And then Chelsea fans are singing Kai Havertz is the best on earth when he scores 2 back-to-back penalties. Like, come on, guys, let's wake up. You know, it's not been great at all. You know, Kai Havertz has not brought enough to the table. And like you said, we can't really be cutting him, you know, slack that he's not familiar with the Prem. You know, it's been years now. You know, you should be able to, especially as a young player, be able to settle into a league after playing in the Premier League for 3 years now. And I won't use that as an excuse, but, you know, you can kind of say, oh, well, he's been mistreated or he's been played out of his position. You know, he's not a striker, you know. But at the end of the day, even in the when he has played in his position, you can argue, you know, he's underperformed and he's disappointed us. But, you know, like I said, I'm not a person who hates Havertz, and I'm not a person who's like, you know, get him out of the team at all costs. But I think that it's sensible to accept that we have to move on from Havertz as well. And I mean, there is potential to make the money that we need to, and that is quite important right now. You know, that's our mission. That's what we're trying to do. So, you know, I think it is time to say goodbye to Kai Havertz as well. And it's just crazy to think that, you know, that's how much did we pay for him? 80 million?
70 million. I think there are probably a few add-ons in there. Could be up to 75. I don't really know. But do you know what? The Havertz thing just, to me, raises a wider question as to why do so many players fail at Chelsea? So many top talented players that we sign that other top teams are interested in. They've got great reputations. Why, when they come to Chelsea, do they not fulfill their potential? And that for me is a bigger question, because the long list of players we've got, you know, Havertz hasn't worked out, Werner didn't work out, Lukaku hasn't worked out, long list of centre forwards that haven't worked out. Why are top players coming to Chelsea and not working out and not being able to deliver? Because that for me is a bigger worry. Because, you know, we're going to sign young players, and are we going to have this conversation about Mudryk? Are we going to have this conversation about Madueke? Like, are we going to be having this conversation about young talented players that come in and cannot reach their potential at Chelsea but go elsewhere and do really well? Now, that for me surely cannot literally purely be on the player. It's not. There's too many players for it just to be a player issue. It's a club issue as well. It's a culture issue. It's a fan issue, putting too much pressure on players and then slating them for doing the smallest thing wrong time and time again. It's a collective responsibility. Like, it's not helpful, the constant chopping and changing of managers. One manager brings a player in to play in a certain way and a certain system and whatnot. Bang, 6 months later, that manager's gone. New players are coming in, a different way of playing. Like, this is not a way to get the best out of players. You need, as a young, talented player, you need continuity, you need consistency. And at Chelsea, there's been zero continuity, and there's been zero consistency over the last few years, which I think is a massive factor as to why so many players are not succeeding at their football club, but then going on elsewhere to do really well. And you can't tell me that this long list of players aren't suited to the Premier League. We've seen Lukaku score bucket loads of goals in the Premier League for multiple different sides. Werner has been a very good footballer in the Bundesliga and done well for the national side. Havertz, exactly the same. You know, these are guys that are good footballers, talented boys, and yet for whatever reason, as soon as they come to the Premier League and put that Chelsea shirt on, they can't deliver. And that purely just isn't down to them. Yes, you know, they're the guys that are going on the pitch and they have to deliver, but we have to put everything else around them to give them the best possible environment to succeed in. And ultimately, we're not doing that. It's so obvious to me that we're not doing that on a consistent enough basis to get the best out of these players. And you see them go elsewhere. You can guarantee if Havertz goes to Real Madrid, you'll see how good a footballer he is. And he'll score loads of goals and he'll do really well. And you'll be like, well, what the fuck did we have with Havertz? Was it his twin brother? Like it's mad to think that, you know, how many players have come to Chelsea with massive reputations and just not delivered. The club have got to take some responsibility for that as well, in my opinion, and the fans as well. I mean, look, I'm not going to absorb myself from any blame because we all do it. Some obviously a lot more so than others, but we get on players' backs. We criticise performances. Like if they don't play well for a couple of games or whatever, oh God, this guy's shit, get him out of the team. People don't seem to realise that young players are going to make mistakes, but they're going to grow from those mistakes. You've got to stick with them, and they need consistency. This is why I've been annoyed with like Lampard's treatment of Mudryk, for example, or Potter not playing Mudryk enough. Like Mudryk's raw. He makes mistakes. His touch is a bit loose. He's frustrating at the moment slightly. But as a young player, you're all going to make those mistakes. But you need to play consistently and get 90 minutes under your belt and not play 60 minutes one week. You're the first guy off the pitch to be subbed. Then you're out the team for a couple of games. You're not going to get any better as a young player by being in and out the side, playing a few games here and there. And I just think, for me, the club have just let a lot of these players down on so many occasions. And, you know, we can't keep signing top players and then them not working out and they go and be really good somewhere else. And then we're like, well, why has that happened? So, I mean, what do you put it down to? Because it's not just Havertz. It's a wider issue. But, I mean, what are your thoughts on kind of the amount of players that Chelsea sign that have got great reputations and are talented, doesn't work out for them at Chelsea, but they go elsewhere and they do really well for themselves?
Yeah, I always have this thing where I say you're only a good forward if you can come to Chelsea and still be a good forward and score goals. Like, that's just it. Like you said it, it's just, it almost is like, what is wrong with us? Like, why is it like this? But no, in terms of the consistency, like that is literally the main problem. It's the inconsistency. And it's been this season as well. Like, we've constantly been crying, like the players you mentioned, you know, playing Madrid, playing Madueke, they're here to stay. Like, these players are never going to be able to play together if you literally don't play them, especially when they've had the opportunity to play alongside some of the senior players this season. You know, that's something you potentially could have maximised. You know, I'm talking to Lampard and Potter here, but no, it's just like you said, we make rotations which just don't make sense. And then, you know, like if we're talking about players that have been disrespected, take Carney Chukwuemeka as well this season, for example. You know, he's barely kind of seen the glimpses of the pitch, but, you know, when he has, he's had some good moments. You know, he's obviously a young player. He's going to make mistakes. You know, he's not going to be the most confident at times. But, you know, you only, like you said, learn and you grow. Like, if you play, you get better. If you play with senior players, you learn and you perform better. And I feel like loads of them have not had the chance to do that. And, you know, like, you can put that down to the manager, you know, obviously with the selection of lineups and stuff. But imagine what it is for a young player who puts on a good performance, you know, for the first team against, you know, let's say like a top 6 team, you know, put on a good performance, maybe a close to an assist or whatever it may be, and then you're benched the next game. You know, well, what does that do to a young player? That's literally what I've been saying kind of all season, is that doesn't build confidence, that doesn't build skill, it doesn't build you know, it doesn't build anything. You know, if anything, you're just hindering that person's growth, you're hindering the player's ability to grow as well, and their mentality as well. I always said the players that arrived, you know, like Madueke and Mudryk, their attitude is credit to themselves, you know, themselves. I always think, you know, you've come into the shambolic mess, you know, it's gone wrong left, right and centre, you've not been given any playing time, but yet the pressure is still put on you when you are brought on or you are starting, you know, that one odd game in the Premier League, and then all the pressure's on you and all eyes are on you because the fans haven't seen you play in a while. You know, you haven't played alongside any of the players haven't played with you, and it's just this whole big mess, and then they're expected to perform on the pitch. So for me, that's just been kind of the biggest issue. And, you know, I'll go back to on your point about Pochettino not using too many players. I think that's a good thing. Perfect. Does that mean we'll get Sino, Mudryk and Madueke starting consistently? Because that will literally be the best thing. We'll accept as fans when they make mistakes, and, you know, we'll be a little bit more understanding at the start, of course, because at the end of the day, they're here to stay. You've already seen some raw, you know, kind of promising potential as well, you know, I'd say. And, you know, given the right opportunity, training, belief from the manager, that can turn into something special. And that is why I've cut a lot of the new arrivals some slack, because I think, you know, a lot of them have been failed by the managers. I think a lot of them have been kind of left out to dry. And yeah, we've paid money, we've said come into this long-term project, but you, my friends, you are not playing. Like, you are just going to sit on the bench and just wait around. So I think Poch coming in and potentially starting certain players week in, week out to just try it, that's the best way to learn. You don't learn anything and you don't get anything out of rotating things and changing things every single time. You know, I think I said, okay, he benched Frank, for example, benched Wesley Fofana for having a terrible game against United, but then have the same energy with the players that played well, you know, start them, then give them starts, you know, believe in them. And you know what, like I said, it's credit to all of these arrivals for their attitude and for them to want to stay, you know, and play at Chelsea, because we really risked losing the mentality of those players as well, you know, towards the end of it. If they're sat there thinking, well, what is going on, like this is a whole huge mess, I don't want to be here, you know, and then you risk having that attitude, and then that's just a disease that spreads around the squad. So consistency is truly, I know it's easier said than done, but consistency is just truly what we've just needed all season. You know, we went through enough change, obviously, with the sacking of Tuchel and the change of ownership and just consistently things changing. It's like, well, all we need is just to try. And I genuinely thought at the start of the season, I thought Tuchel would be given that time, you know, just time. Time is literally what I kept saying is needed. You know, nothing happens overnight, nothing will change. But there was just too much change, and that is literally where I think we really set ourselves up for failure this season. And yeah, like you said, what can I put it down on? I can put it down on managers, but like I said, we're really lucky that a lot of our new arrivals are still eager to grow and to learn, and are excited for Pochettino to come in. So I think we could have failed ourselves even more this season, because everyone knew that things weren't good at the club, in several departments, in the dressing room, but yeah, well, I forgot where I was going with that point. Yeah.
It's a fair point. People always go like, it's so annoying because like when people go on about, oh yeah, but we won stuff under the hire and fire mentality. Yeah, we did, but football's different now. The Premier League's so much more competitive. You can't get away with doing that now. Gone are the days now where you can just drop a top manager into Chelsea and they'll win stuff, because those teams that when that happened, we had a team that was ready to win now. The Premier League wasn't what it was, City weren't what they are now. You didn't have the likes of Newcastle, Brighton and whatnot. The depth wasn't the same. And now you look at it and you think, like, in order to be successful and to win, you've got to have a plan. You've got to have some sort of longevity. And I get football's unique in the fact that you've got to plan long-term but succeed short-term, which is kind of a bit of a contradiction. But that's the way it goes. But we have to, as fans, like, understand, and I know it's difficult for certain Chelsea fans of a generation that have grown up with all they've known is winning, and if we're not winning, then the default reaction is to get rid of the manager. But we're not going to get anywhere by constantly getting rid of the manager. Now we're going to go through bad spells next season under Pochettino. We cannot be getting on his back and demanding for him to be removed from his position, because it's just pointless, and we're just starting again and again and again. It's just a vicious cycle. We just have to accept that right now we're not in a position to achieve the standards that are set at this football club to be challenging for the league, to be winning the big trophies in the game. We're not there yet. It might take us a couple of seasons to get there, but we have to get on board with the process and accept that, we could be a couple of years in the wilderness and then we're back and we start winning stuff again. And I think that's a small price to trade to get the club back on track. But in terms of other players, obviously, wouldn't be talking about Chelsea without touching on Mason Mount. I mean, I'm sick of the subject. It's so boring, but we need to cover it. Obviously, he hasn't signed a new contract with the club. He's got a year left on his deal now. Chelsea wanting around £70 million for the player, depending on what side you believe. Chelsea saying they've done everything they can to keep him. They've offered acceptable contract offers. Mount's side saying the opposite. Instead of just having briefings that suit one side, let's have some clarity rather than just PR and saving face. You don't really know what's going on. Mount has turned down contract offers. There's no doubt about it. These were all before the World Cup. Just prior to the World Cup, though, there was a verbal agreement in place with the contracts agreed with Bowley and Egbali on imaging rights, money and whatnot. And then after the World Cup in January, supposedly that deal was pulled when it changed hands to go to Chelsea's senior leadership team. Mount's camp saying that was changed. And then subsequently, there's been nothing offered since February. He's close to joining Man United, potentially. Chelsea's still trying to do their best. They're insistent they're doing everything they can to keep Mount.
Oh, really?
Where do you stand on the Mount situation? Because right now it's just kind of briefings from both sides, and you don't really know what to believe. But for me, it's just a madness that we're even in this situation where we've got someone that's been at the club since 8 years of age. He loves the club. This should be the easiest contract to sort out imaginable, and yet it looks like we're going to fuck this up, and he's going to go and he's going to go and join a rival now. Yes, it's going to hurt more. There's going to be more fuss about it when it's one of your own and he's come through the academy than, say, if it's a foreign player. I'm not saying that Mount's some sort of world beater, unbelievable player, but, when it's one of your own and you've got to show, like, the academy and stuff, that there is a path to being successful at Chelsea. What does that show to other academy lads that, at 24 years of age, with the prime of your prime years ahead of you, that the club are happy? I don't want to say happy because I don't know if they're happy, but the club cannot seem to keep someone that's come through the academy. Like, it's kind of mad. And, we've got to move away from this idea that every single academy player is going to be a success and is going to make it at Chelsea. That's not going to happen. It's been so long since we've had regular academy players in the team. For so long, it was just JT. Then we've had Loftus, we've had Hudson-Odoi, we've had Mason Mount, we've had Conor Gallagher, we've had Reece James, Chalobah. Not all of them playing regularly, but all of them have appeared for the first team. But for me, I just cannot understand how this contract has been so difficult to sort out. Where do you stand on it all? Because, as I said, for me, it would be a shame. Look, no player's bigger than the club. Bigger players have come and gone. Hazard, Matters, and whatnot. But this one kind of just leaves a bit of a bad taste in the mouth if he does move on.
No, yeah, I agree. And I wasn't really quick to react in terms of, oh, that's a trait, like you're a traitor, because like you said, you're never going to know exactly kind of how it stood, obviously, on two parties. And I guess we're never really going to know. But I've tried to look at it from both sides. I've tried to, you know, kind of, if the club felt like they couldn't. It's tricky. It's tricky because, like you said, you shouldn't have to convince a homegrown player that they should stay at the club. You know, it's one of them things where you love the club. You know, players, like fans were talking about this man being, you know, a potential leader, a potential captain, you know, captain of Chelsea, you know, the future. And like you said, I think it's a little bit hard because in a season where so many things went wrong and so many players didn't want to be at Chelsea, you kind of were relaxed by the fact that, you know, you did have your kind of proper Chelsea's in there, you know, like your Reece Jameses, like your Mason Mounts, you know, supposedly, and you kind of took comfort from that. So I think from that aspect, it's going to be a little bit of a hard one to swallow. I think it's even worse that it's Manchester United as well. When I first opened Instagram to see like Mason Mount in a Manchester United photo, like, you know, when it just doesn't quite sit right, like a player in a different shirt, like it's just wild to even think that's happening. But yeah, like you said, I mean, there's a lot of. It really is tricky. It really is tricky. I think I'll be upset, but I don't think I'm gonna like cry over it, if that makes sense. Because at the end of the day, if he doesn't want to be at Chelsea anymore, then we're not gonna convince you to stay. Do you know what I mean? Like we shouldn't be doing that as fans. I do think the way he kind of went about it, because obviously it must have been known, right? It's definitely been known in the last, I don't know, maybe how long, but it has been something that's known. And I kind of rewinded to Newcastle on the last game of the season, and you know how we kind of knew that we were saying goodbye to like Loftus Cheek, probably like Kovacic and kind of Aspilicueta and whatnot. But you know, Mount was quiet. Like he did obviously make the 360 round the pitch, clap the fans with the rest of his teammates. But you know, something wasn't quite right. He almost didn't look like he wanted to say and have a big goodbye, because he felt like kind of he wasn't going to be deserving of that. Like, you know, imagine like if we had this kind of big goodbye, like everyone's singing Mason Mount, like he's idolized at the bridge. You know, there's kids that look up to him. There's kind of, you know, like what are the kids thinking? You know, the ones that kind of haven't been around that long, you know, they're not that old. And Mason Mount is a player that they've kind of grown up with, you know, and looked up to as an idol, as someone that isn't that much older than you as a person. So from that side, yeah. But you know, a lot of people saying money Mace. Will he get offered, like how much money will he get offered if he goes to Manchester United? Because what's on the table?
I don't know. I don't think there's no like offer on the table. Like this whole personal terms agreed thing is such a loose term. Like it doesn't really mean anything, you know. The most important thing is agreeing a fee. Personal terms, yeah, like that's expected to not be a problem. Now, I don't know that means that United are going to offer him 250k and that's what he wants. Like, I don't know what the numbers are, but for me, I could be being naive here, but I refuse to believe that for Mason Mount, he's purely not signing at Chelsea because of money. There must be something bigger than this. I don't know. I don't know if he feels disrespected by the club because, you know, the offer that had been verbally agreed was then changed. Regardless of that being about Mason Mount, you cannot negotiate you cannot be in a situation as a football club where you're negotiating with players and you verbally agree something, and then when you come back to talk about it again, that offer's been pulled or it's been changed. That is not a way to conduct business, and that is a surefire way to piss players off and not make them want to stay and sign a new deal, because you cannot be seen as a club that goes back on their word. You know, if that was true, that it was verbally agreed before the World Cup and they were happy to sign, and then when you in January you come to it and the goalposts have been moved, that's not acceptable. But what I don't understand is that if that's been agreed with Bowley and Eghbali and it's been handed down to the senior leadership team, why is that suddenly changed? Surely there's that communication there between Bowley and the other guys where, look, this is the offer we've agreed, sort it out. Like, how is something changed? So for me, with the whole Mount thing, like, there's so much information out there, so much contradicting information that people are just going to pick whatever nuggets of information they want that suit their narrative, and without paying any attention to kind of the facts of the situation. I guess we may never truly know what the situation is. Is it more on the club side? Is it more on the Mount side? I suspect it's a combination of the two, but ultimately we're never really going to find out. And one way or another, the sooner this is done, the better, because then we can move on. Chelsea can move on. And if it's with Mason Mount, great, because I think he can be a really useful player for us. And if it's not, then other guys will come in, the club will carry on, and we'll soon forget about it. But for me, it's just something that could have been so easily avoided. And ultimately, what I would say for Mount, though, is one thing that perhaps goes against him slightly is coming off the back of a shocking season. He's not in the best negotiating position. He's not got the most leverage. Like, ultimately, for me, this should have been dealt with as soon as we won the Champions League. He should have signed a new contract in that summer. And then, you know, you've got a bit more leverage as a player. Look, I've just been instrumental in winning us the Champions League. I'm worthy of X, Y, Z amount. It's like, I need to feel valued by you and whatnot. He would have been in a far stronger position, and he should have been offered a new contract after the Champions League final. No two ways about it. And yes, you know, I wonder what the difference is, because we've seen no kind of publicity of this scale on Reece James signing a new deal, Brozier signing a new deal, Chilwell extending, Chalobah extending, Thiago Silva extending for a year. All those contracts were no problem at all to sort out. Well, at least publicly, there was nothing in the media about any difficulty in negotiations. So surely with that many contracts being so easily sorted out, what is so difficult to sort about this contract? Like, I'd love to know, because it seems something's not adding up, because we've easily extended other players, but for Mount, it seems to be a massive problem. And I don't really get that. But yeah, it's one of those things where people are going to have their own thoughts on it. And I've got no issue with people that think Mount's, you know, perhaps Mount's not good enough for Chelsea, or we should move on from him or whatnot. That's fine. But don't reinvent the wheel and say that he's shit, say that he's leaving for money, when actually you don't know that. You don't know that. And he clearly isn't shit. He's been a back-to-back player of the year at this club. He's proven that he can do it. And the same people that praise Felix, oh, Felix was great, you know, scored 4 goals, and he scored them against teams down the bottom of the table, and he's getting praised for it. And it's the same people that then criticise Mount, oh, he only scores against relegation teams, that praise Felix for it. So, you know, we're not bringing the same energy. It's contradictory stuff here. But yeah, for me, it's something that, you know, I'm not going to cry about it. I'll be disappointed if he goes, but it's just something that could have been so easily avoided. And we've got to be careful in future contract negotiations that we don't allow repeat situations like this to happen again with other players. But I mean, just to round this one out, in terms of incomings, who would you like to see come in? Obviously, the club are linked with Manu Ugarte at Sporting Lisbon in that defensive midfield role. Should get a decision in the next week or so on whether he chooses us or PSG. What players would you like to see come in?
Well, I mean, yeah, like you said, we're linked with a lot of exciting names. Obviously, I think midfield is going to be kind of one of the first to address. I mean, this whole season, I've been a massive fan of Casado. I mean, that's not really surprising there. I think Casado has been absolutely brilliant this season. How likely we are? I mean, I've seen us be linked with him quite a bit, you know, a little bit in January, a little bit maybe over summer now. But I mean, he is available. I think Brighton are looking to sell him as well, obviously. He's going to come with his own expensive price tag, but I see that being a very kind of refreshing addition to our midfield. You know, someone that can really complement Enzo as well there in the middle. So yeah, that would be a fantastic kind of signing. I think it'd be quite a perfect signing actually for summer. Potentially for strikers, I mean, obviously Victor Osimhen has been thrown in there quite a bit. Again, obviously another young kind of talented rising player in the making there. But then you kind of face what you said earlier about, oh, well, you know, we do see these young kind of talented players across different leagues, and then they come to Chelsea and it's just like a big drop off. And is that, you know, we have a reputation, well, a lot of like rival fans say that we ruin players, don't they? Like, that's kind of a thing that's been thrown around for a long time, is that we ruin players, like good kind of rising young players there. But, you know, I think we're yet to kind of break that stereotype, well, hopefully, because obviously we've signed a lot of youngsters as well now, and they are here to stay. Like, they're not going anywhere. A lot of them are in 7, 8, 9-year contract deals now. So, you know, like it or not, like, you're staying, and we're going to try and work out how you fit, and hopefully that's something special there. But, you know, I think the ideal front three next season would be, if we look at someone like Madueke, obviously Nkunku's coming in, he's going to occupy more of a number 10 role. Maybe he's not a striker, is he? So I don't think we're going to play him as a striker. So he's going to take that kind of number 10 role as well. And then we need an actual, you know, number 9 there. I think we're probably going to loan out Datro Fofana, aren't we? So we're not really going to look to build around him at all, even though, you know, he's another player that showed glimpses of some beautiful football when he was given the opportunity. So yeah, a strike I think will be very, very interesting there. And also tell me that we're not going to get Lukaku back, because is that an actual thing that could happen?
Well, I mean, it could happen, but I think ultimately he wants to stay at Inter Milan. I think the only way it would work, if he desperately wants to come back to Chelsea, and I think that appears very unlikely. We'll hold talks with Pochettino once the Champions League final's done. But I look, for Lukaku coming back, I think it seems like a long shot. But with Chelsea, you can kind of never say never. But it absolutely depends on, does the player want to try and make a success of his time at Chelsea? And if he doesn't, then it's got no legs and it's not a go. But yeah, I mean, I look at it and you think, yeah, Casado and Ugarte would be fantastic to sign in midfield. I mean, it's easy to say that, but it's a lot more, the reality is a lot more difficult. We see him close to Ugarte. Casado is going to be more challenging. But for me, we're not going to get Declan Rice, so we have to get Moises Caicedo. It's kind of as simple as that. And then you're looking at the other areas, a goalkeeper we need as well. We're looking at Onana at Inter Milan. I'm a fan of his. I like him. Pochettino supposedly is a fan of Emi Martinez at Aston Villa. That could be a difficult deal to do. So there's options at goalkeeper. Centre forward's an interesting one, as you touched on. You know, obviously Victor Osimhen is kind of a standout name in the market this summer, but again, we've seen us go down the route of spending big money on strikers and it not working out. We need to actually do our work and our due diligence here and think, right, yes, Osimhen's a great goal scorer and he's done really well for Napoli, but is he what we're looking for at Chelsea? Is he going to be a fit to the Premier League? Is he going to be a fit to the way that we play? Is he the right character for the club? So these are all things that have got to be considered. I mean, my personal preference at centre forward would have been Ivan Toney, but you know, unfortunately, with the betting ban and stuff, that's kind of put that one on the shelf, and it's not going to happen. So striker market's difficult. We're looking at Osimhen, maybe. Kane is an obvious name on there, but he's not going to come to Chelsea. And then you're looking at players like Dusan Vlahovic at Juventus, talented. Bayern Munich are going to be interested in him. You're looking at Lautaro Martinez at Inter Milan. He's a back-to-back 25-plus goal seasons. Decent player. Pochettino reportedly a fan of his. So yeah, for me, as long as, look, I'm going to have my ideas of who I'd like to see, but ultimately, like, if Pochettino identifies players, we need to go out and get those players for him. It's kind of as simple as that. In my opinion, we're in a position where we have to back the manager, do everything we can to get him the players that he wants. We're not going to be able to get him every single one, because we're in a unique situation this summer where all the top teams are looking for players in the same positions in terms of midfield and centre forward. And we're not all going to get the same player, but we are going to be looking at the same player. So some teams are going to end up disappointed. They're going to have multiple targets on the list, but it's certainly exciting. I think there's a lot to look forward to, but there's also a slight worry that, having missed out on players last summer of them wanting to go to other clubs, that the same could happen this summer, which is vital that we strike early, because whilst we haven't got European football to offer to top players, we need to try and obviously sell them the project, offer something competitive financially, and then hope that we can conclude the business quickly. But it looks like we're going in the right direction in terms of outgoings. Incomings, we're clearly working on stuff, and we just got to sit tight and kind of see what happens. But yeah, I think that seems like a good point to round out this episode. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you smash the likes, subscribe to Chelsea Fan TV if you haven't done so already. Make sure you leave your thoughts in the comments below if you agreed or disagreed with anything discussed in today's episode, and we'll catch you again in another episode soon.